Where did your journey start and what brought you to the front line of this fentanyl epidemic?
I was a police officer, got on like 1997. I'm working an undercover case with a lady who was prostituting her daughter in exchange for drugs and sex. Both my partner and I sustained some severe injuries in this accident. I break my ankle, blow my knee out. That was kind of the start of it, man. Like, I went to the doctor. I'm going to prescribe you some opioids, but because you're a cop, you're never going to get addicted to this stuff. I lost my identity and I sat in my bathroom for 7 days, dude. And the realness is this, man. I was shitting myself. I was throwing up on myself. I was urinating myself. I said, okay, God, if you give me a chance to walk out of this place and not take my life and let me change and let me go, I'll do something about this. If that's not your plan, I want you to take my life right now, because I can't throw up anymore. I can't suffer anymore. I'm ready.
My father-in-law took his own life with a gun. I went to clean out his truck and I saw the bullet holes in the seat. You know, those are images you don't get out of your head.
People on the streets are scared to stop using. Nobody wants to stop using fentanyl because the withdrawal from fentanyl is the worst thing they've ever experienced. So they're like, I would rather die than get sober.
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. And welcome to the newcomers, and welcome back, you returning Spartans. Today I have a fun hybrid episode for you. Most of the time as you tune in, we'll talk through mindset, leadership, talking to a high potential influencer or coach or just an awesome person. And that we have today. But we also do these episodes called Leadership and Review, where we're assessing the current state of the state, whether it be politics, corporate, different social matters on leadership, and if there's lack of leadership or true leadership. And in this instance, we're going to do a hybrid of the both, because I got a special guest. I have a true Spartan on the line, and after introducing him and his mastery of his own domain, we're going to dig into some large-scale leadership and review. So hold on tight. This could be a little bit bumpy ride. With me today, husband, father of 7. I'm a father of 4, and that's crazy to think about, my brother. Retired undercover police officer and drug and alcohol recovery expert, Brock Bevell. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you, Josh. Thanks for having me. This is cool.
All right, before we start, we got to talk a little bit of football and the connection. So we're just talking pre-show. So for those Badger fans that listen in, this is Darrell Bevell's younger brother, Brock. So I came to Madison in 8th grade. Darrell Bevell, the starting quarterback, leading to the Rose Bowl under Barry Alvarez's tutelage. Now been in the NFL coaching for many, many years. So the connection was fun to make that this morning, because your brother is a big part of why I became a Badger fan, even though I'm tied to all Chicago professional sports.
Hey, listen, we're from Arizona, man. We became a Badger fan because Darrell went there. That place changed his life, to be honest with you. You know, I don't know if you know it, a few years ago, he was inducted to the Badger Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Which was kind of cool.
Yeah, and our friend Joe Thomas shares that honor, and we'll be joining the Hall of Fame ranks here shortly, Mr. Thomas will. But yeah, your brother was a big part of my childhood, man. So it's been cool to watch him go through the NFL, and it's awesome to have this conversation and make that connection today. So today we are going to take a look at our nation's leaders and their steps in addressing our deadly fentanyl epidemic. We'll also get into some fun topics on mindset, and we'll probably bounce all over the place. But speaking, before we get into all that, I would love for our listeners to hear a little bit of your backstory. You know, where did your journey start, and what brought you to the front line of this fentanyl epidemic?
Cool. I was a police officer, like you said, right here in Mesa, Arizona. So everything I do is I'm kind of blessed, man. My addiction started here. My career started here. My recovery started right here in Arizona. And I was a police officer, got on like 1997. And I just had this infatuation, man, this like sensation with arresting bad guys and dope. I wasn't a doper growing up. I mean, I grew up in a super structured militaristic format in my home. My dad was a football coach. My brother, very, very driven. Sports were it for us. But what was interesting when I became a cop, like I became really good at working narcotics. And so there was a couple cases that happened, but on one particular night, I'm working an undercover case with a lady who was prostituting her daughter in exchange for drugs and sex. So she sets the deal up. She shows up. We show up. We arrest her. She tries to take off and run us over. So both my partner and I sustained some severe injuries in this accident. She's fleeing the scene, runs us over. I break my ankle, blow my knee out. And that was kind of the start of it, man. Like I went to the doctor, went to the hospital, went to the doctor. They said, hey, your knee's blown out. You're going to have surgeries. And I remember the doctor, Dr. Levine, sitting in the office with me saying, hey, I'm going to prescribe you some opioids, but because you're a cop, you're never going to get addicted to this stuff. So I don't know about you, Josh, but I've never heard that cops are immune to opioid addiction.
Yeah, that was the first thing that went to my head is like, you don't have a bulletproof vest to prevent an internal thing that's going into your body to prevent an opioid.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know where he was going with it. Maybe it was just something to make me feel better, but man, I remember the first time I took an opioid, I loved it. I remember how it made me feel. It made my pain go away, but not only the physical pain, but it made the mental anguish and pain go away. And so basically what happened is I tried to come back to work, and because of the nature of my injuries, they retired me. And so when I retired, I don't know, Josh, how if you've ever went through this, but I lost my identity. Here I am working as an undercover cop, and I thought I was cool, and I had the long hair and earrings and goatee and all this. I'm dealing some dope, and I'm doing these huge cases. And the next thing you know, I'm retired. They say I'm not fit for duty, and I'm at home with my wife and kids, changing diapers and cleaning the house. And I'm like, this ain't it, man. This ain't my life. And so I started using the opioids to quash some of those emotions, to quash those feelings. And to the point to where, man, end up divorced, having an affair on my wife, doing all the stupid shit that you do in addiction. Took me 10 years, man. It took 10 years of my life in active addiction. And people always, I'm sure you'll ask me too, Josh, how did you overcome the addiction? Is I got to a point where I was just done. I was done. You know what I mean? I was tired of it. I took a pill one morning, went in my medicine cabinet. When I shut the medicine cabinet, it gave me a glimpse into my life. It gave me a glimpse into my room, and it made me think of, hey, Brock, you're a freaking crackhead, dude. You're living in a crack house. You've served warrants on these things. You got to get yourself right. So out of anger, dude, I opened my cabinet, dumped all my pills down the toilet and flushed them. Biggest mistake I've ever made in my life, but greatest decision, if that makes any sense. Biggest mistake was, that's not how you detox from opioids. That's not how the journey begins. Like there's better treatment. And that's what I would tell your listeners if they're like, oh, that's what I should do. No, it's not. Go to the doctor, let them give you some help to get off those pills. But I just cold turkey, dude. I dumped it and said, hey, I'm in it. And I sat in my bathroom for 7 days, dude. And I mean, the realness is this, man. I was shitting myself. I was throwing up on myself. I was urinating myself. I had the worst restless leg syndrome I've ever felt in my life. I felt like my backbone was coming out my mouth. I was dry heaving. It was hell for 7 days, dude. And had a conversation with God. That's really what happened. You know, you talk about rock bottom, you talk about surrender, you talk about all these things in addiction. I was done. And I said, okay, God, if you give me a chance to walk out of this place and not take my life and let me change and let me go, I'll do something about this. But if that's not your plan, I want you to take my life right now, because I can't throw up anymore. I can't suffer anymore. I'm ready. And so basically that's what happened, Josh, is I got empowered. I walked out of the bathroom, and it's been 13 years, 2 weeks ago, and I haven't looked back, and I haven't even flirted with it, you know, but it was a decision I had to make. And so that's kind of the start, the preface of everything that we're doing now.
Yeah. Well, that's such a powerful story, and how much God intervened. I was actually going to ask you if you were a believer, because it seemed like God intervened not just before your prayer, but that instance you looked in the mirror.
Oh, you know what's funny is I've always had an awesome relationship with God, but it wasn't till I could step back and realize how many times God showed up. There was a moment particular that after I was getting sober, um I was still in it, but I was on the road. I was trying to get my life back, and I'm driving up to see my kids for the first time after the divorce. And so I get a little emotional telling this story, but this is how real it gets, man. Is I'm driving through the Salt River Canyon, if people know that here in Arizona, and it's just super windy roads. And from my house to where my kids were, it was a 4-hour drive. And on that path, man, like depression and sorrow and sadness and just the overwhelming guilt and shame of who I'd become and what I was doing, it was hitting me. And I was like, you need to take your life. You have a weapon in your car. Your kids don't need you. They'll be better off. They don't want a part-time dad. They don't want a divorced dad, all this stuff. So I remember pulling over and I grabbed my weapon and I put it in my mouth. And the craziest thing was at the moment that I was thinking about, hey, who's going to have to pick me up? Who's going to have to see this? I'm thinking of all the cops that are going to have that like traumatic experience of seeing this event. I hear the voice of my son sitting in the back seat. Hey, Dad, just like we're talking, he wasn't there, but it's just like this audible. Hey, Dad, you're not a chump. You're not going out this way. That's what I heard my son Taven say to me. And I'm like, it was so audible, Josh, that I looked in the back seat like he was there, like he had snuck in my car, And I'm like, okay, that's a God shot. So I took that gun, I put it in the console, and I'm just like, let's go. If God's willing to intervene like that, if he's willing to keep showing up like that, then there's something about me that I need to be doing, and putting a bullet in me is not it. So total relationship with God. And if you are in active addiction, the only way, and I'll say this, I'll put myself on the line for it, is there's no other way to recover. There's just no other way unless you find that higher power, that reason to be sober.
Yeah, man, so many emotions stirred in me in that. My father-in-law took his own life with a gun. And you said, who's going to find you and stuff of that nature. My mother-in-law still struggles with PTSD. Almost 5 years, in less than about 3 weeks, it'll be 5 years. And I went to clean out his truck, and I saw the bullet holes in the seat. I saw the window blown out. Those are images you don't get out of your head. So, man, so glad you're here, brother. But yeah, that's a really, really powerful story. So glad that God sent an angel in your son's image that day, because otherwise you wouldn't be helping who you're helping right now. So,
yeah, you're right.
All right, I'm going to compose myself a minute. But for those listening who are just learning, you started on opioids and you didn't get to the fentanyl piece, right?
You know what? And I am so blessed that I didn't. Opioids were bad enough, you know what I mean? Like oxys, horrible. But now that the fentanyl's here, it's a game changer. It's totally different.
Yeah, I told you I had a good friend that started on opioids, and it got so bad that it got to heroin. But I think he was also pre-2010 before he got himself clean. So I think, it didn't get it to fentanyl as well. But like you said, opioids are bad enough. So fentanyl taking it to a whole nother level. Let's give a little, I want to, some of the research I did leading up to this episode, and then you can add on to it, because I want to give our listeners a brief rundown and history of just how dang bad this thing is. So fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 49. More than 9 million Americans misuse opioids in 2020. And again, like you and I said, the stats are a couple years old. So we know that it's exponentially gotten worse, especially through COVID. In 2021, drug overdoses, 107,622. 2/3 of those were due to fentanyl. 2/3. And then this goes on to say the fentanyl crisis deepened during the coronavirus pandemic. From 19 to 21, fatal overdoses surged 94%. So, and we know, I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but I know attempted suicides and suicides surged around that same percentage. So there's probably some direct correlation that we could draw as well. An estimated 196 Americans are now dying each day from the drug. That's the equivalent of a fully loaded Boeing 757 crashing and killing everyone on board. I know I just gave every single day. Yes. Thank you. What did I miss, and what else do you want to add to that to give a rundown for our listeners before we get into some of the heavy questions?
Yeah, well, here's some facts, man. In last year, 107,000 Americans died from overdose. Not just fentanyl, but overdose. Right now, it's 303 a day that are dying from overdose. From all, right? Fentanyl is probably 75, 78% of that right now. And what people don't understand is really important when you think about opioids and you think about the difference between heroin and fentanyl. Do you know, Josh, the difference?
I don't. I was just going to ask you. Let's explain that.
Yeah, this is super interesting because I think for you to understand, it's paramount. So we've heard about these opioids, these poppy plants that are all over the world, right? Mostly in the Middle East, and we've fought wars over these damn things. So heroin comes from a plant. Comes from the poppy plant. It takes a little bit of time to produce, right? You have to grow it, and then you have to cure for it, and then you have to like melt it down, and you have to do all these things to get heroin. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. So they're chemicals mixed together that make the opioids in a soluble form. Okay, so you think about it. So when I go to the doctor, I can get a fentanyl patch that is pharmaceutical grade. It's a patch. I stick it on my injury like a Band-Aid, and it soaks through the skin.
Yeah.
That's a pharmaceutical grade. That's an opioid, but it's not coming from the plant. So today, the plants, the heroin plants, non-existent. They don't even need to use them anymore because you can put chemicals together to make those precursors to make fentanyl. And so what's happening is it's originating in China, where all medications are. So we get ibuprofen from China, Bear aspirin, China. You know what I'm saying? Like most of what we get's shipped over because they have the pharmaceutical companies, they have the pharmacists that do it. Well, we outsource that. Fentanyl's being outsourced. It's coming from China into border towns like Mexico, Canada. It's landing there, and then the cartels, these organizations are making them into powder. That powder is being pressed and pushed or stepped on, whatever you want to use, into every single drug. Cocaine has fentanyl in it. Methamphetamines have fentanyl in it. Marijuana has fentanyl in it. Everything today that we're getting from the streets is laced with fentanyl. That's the problem. Everything. So back in the day, I don't know about you, Josh, but I mean, I smoked weed when I was a little kid. I mean, my buddy's dad has weed. At no time did we ever think, hey, if I smoke a joint, I'm dead.
Yeah,
Not going to happen. Today, if you smoke a joint, there's a possibility that you could die.
Yeah, worst case scenario for us back in the day, to make a little bit of light of it, is we had some beans and stems in that, and we thought we'd go infertile. Right? That was the worst. Some ditchweed that we had from back in high school.
Oh my gosh, man! I make light of this. I ate a brownie one time, and dude, I was on the couch watching Space Jams. And dude, it was like I was Jar Jar Binks, man. I was laying on there, my tongue was hanging out. I felt I was laughing, dude. It was the funniest thing. But I'm thinking, damn, dude, if there was a fire in my house, I could not have gotten up and gotten out. I was that high.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
But
today
no time.
it's
Yeah,
not
no
like that.
time. We're not thinking about dying because we ingested a brownie or smoked a little weed. No.
No. And so today that's the problem is a lot of these deaths, are happening right now. The leading age group of teenagers that are dying, 14. There are more 14 and under that are dying from fentanyl than any other age group. To let that sink in. And why is that? Well, they're with their buddies or at a party, something's happening, they're given a pill and then they take it thinking, hey, this is just an oxy, it's a hydro, it's going to make me feel better. And they go home. And this is a crazy stat. 66% of the people die in their own home. 66%.
Wow.
So what's happening is these kids are taking them, they're not feeling good, they're going home, they're laying on their bed and they're dying, and then their family members are finding them. That's post-traumatic stress. That's
a nightmare.
A nightmare.
It's a nightmare. So one of my initial questions that I've thought about as I've heard of fentanyl in the past. I obviously haven't researched it like you have and have intimate knowledge. But my first thing is like, drug dealers are killing off their money supply. I don't know. I just don't understand that. If you want repeat business as a drug dealer, or any business owner for that matter, but drug dealers are business owners in a sense, street dealers, you're killing your clientele. How is that a profitable business model?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad. There's a couple things in there. Do you know the leading how kids are buying fentanyl today?
No.
Social media. Listen, this is interesting, Josh. I love talking about this. When I worked undercover and I bought dope, I had to make contact with the dealer. I had to build the dealer's trust. I had to start really small with like a little bit of dope at a time, right? Maybe it was an 8-ball or whatever to work up to a quarter pound. I mean, it was just like, it was a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah.
And there was times where it was scary, dude. These guys had guns and I knew I was going into a situation. We had snipers and we were going to take these guys. It was a real deal. Today, children can get online. They can get on Snapchat via emojis. They can order fentanyl and have it delivered to their house quicker than they can buy groceries. It's immediate.
How?
Because all they got to do, dude, the dealers are there, which is a plug, a little emoji plug. They're their drug dealers. So they connect with them. They tell them what they want, how much they're going to spend. It's dropped off at their home.
Mailbox or just knock at the door or what?
Yeah, they knock on the door. You pay via PayPal,
Venmo or
however you
yeah.
want to pay. Grubhub, right? Anything where you buy groceries through, they can route it through that. And a lot of times your parents are paying for it because they tell their mom, hey, I'm going to buy some, Grubhub. Can you pay for it? They're paying for it online. And it's actually fentanyl being dropped off to your house and then it kills your child. Like
that's
this
terrifying.
Go online and have your listeners go online and research fentanyl and Snapchat. There's a direct correlation. It's right now, Snapchat's being sued. It's one of the number one leading cause. And I mean, it's not just Snapchat. It's Facebook Messenger. It's WhatsApp. It's all this stuff, but they can get it delivered to their house. Never talking face to face with the dealer. So that's kind of the scary stuff. Okay. So you asked about killing off. What's crazy is you would think that, but the mindset of a user is if he can find a plug, if he can find a dealer that is providing such potent fentanyl that's overdosing people, I want that plug. I want to go to him. I'm willing to take the risk because your drug is so potent that it's killing people. I want to work with you. I want to buy dope from you. So it's the reverse. You would think, hey, these guys don't want to kill people off, but yeah, they want to prove that they have the most potent product out there.
Yeah, this kind of leads to my next point is that evidently most users are unaware the fentanyl is present until they become hooked or obsessed or overdose, right?
Yeah, if you go buy cocaine, you can't look at your cocaine and say, there's fentanyl in here. You can't really see it. And it's just like the oxys. They stamp the oxys to look just like them. And if you know what your pills look like, you can see the variations. The M's a little different. You can do, but to a young kid, a 14, 15-year-old kid, he's not going to know the difference. He hasn't used long enough, right? And so when you say unassuming, most young kids are dying that way. But if you're a user, and that's the crazy part, is you want fentanyl in your product. So I do a project called the Fentanyl Project that I post on Instagram on our account. And what I do is I want to educate people. So I go out onto the streets and I talk to active users. I talk to people that I have a couple videos out there where they're actively using the fentanyl while on camera. I'm videotaping them, talking to them, and they're using. I have one lady that's showing me the pill and showing me how she smokes it. I'm like, that's crazy to me that you're so willing to put yourself on camera. They don't care. And that's the crazy part, is fentanyl is so potent that it takes the inhibition from the person away. It was interesting. I talked to a lady a couple of days ago. She said, in 4 months, I lost my house. I lost my 2 cars. I lost my job. I lost custody of my kids 4 months after my first dose of fentanyl.
Wow.
That's how powerful this stuff is.
But it's rather inexpensive to get, correct?
So it's when fentanyl became popular in Arizona, because Arizona is kind of the gateway, right?
Yeah,
we all
Arizona
know that
and San Diego, right?
Yeah, well, it comes from the border. So
Yeah.
any border town, it comes in and then it hits all of the major interstates and it flows. When it came into Arizona, it was 30 cents or $30 a pill. Then it went down to 20, then it went down to 10, went down to 5, went down to 3. Right now, fentanyl pills that look like an M30, what looks like an Oxy or a Hydro, 50 cents a pill.
Holy shit.
So you're thinking, well, how the heck do these dealers make money? Right? If you're just sending them at 50 cents a pill, dude. But if you're selling 1 million pills at 50 cents a pill,
It adds up quick.
it adds up quick. Right? And every drug bust that you're seeing, 1 million pills, 500,000 pills. And so when you start looking at what's really available and what's out there, it's ridiculous.
Well, it's utterly scary and fascinating all at the same time. So you mentioned China a little bit earlier and the fentanyl journey, right? So let's talk international labs, because I read, a large part of this is coming from Wuhan, which is kind of interesting that's where, coronavirus came from as well. And I'm not saying there's a correlation there. I just find it interesting. But there's obviously the border control problems. There's the Mexican cartels, which reading about Sinaloa. The last time I saw that was watching Narcos. So seeing the Sinaloa gang reemerge through fentanyl is interesting. Like, they'll find a way. They're going to find a way, and we're creating many ways. So what happens before fentanyl reaches the streets of the U.S., and then how does it, obviously it's being transported through here, but give us kind of an overarching thing between the connection between China, Mexico, and then getting to the streets of the U.S.
Yeah. So you brought up Wuhan, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist either, but if you know about the town of Wuhan in China, it's where most of the pharmaceutical companies reside. It's a huge pharmaceutical area. So it does originate there. It's not something that we're just conspiracy like, that's where it's coming from. That's where it's coming from. That's the DEA has said that the US government has pinned Wuhan as a major source of where fentanyl has come from, whether it's pharmaceutical or illicit. Okay. So basically what happens is it goes from there in a powder or a liquid form. It ships from China, and we're seeing this all over. I mean, this is something the DEA is they're interdicting, however you say it. They're seizing it, right? And they're finding it coming through, and most of the time it's through the air. through boats, and it's landing a lot of times in Mexico. And so what's happening is when it lands in Mexico, it's in a soluble form, and they have to put the chemicals together. So they need people who work in labs to put these in together to make them pills. So what happens is they have pharmaceutical grade pill presses. And so when you start looking at the pills, and when I told you there's like the pills are blue and they're stamped with the M30 because those are pharmaceutical grade pills stamps. And so what they want them to look like that. So in transportation, if the police sees them, if you're carrying them on them, they're going to look like those pills. So when they land in Mexico, there's there's organizations, the cartels. I mean, that's again, it's from the DEA. That's common knowledge that it's there. They're the main producers and traffickers of fentanyl. And what's crazy is when it gets to them, okay, I call it the chocolate chip cookie effect. Okay, and this is really important for your listeners to understand, and why people are overdosing versus why another guy's taking a pill and he's not overdosing. Basically, Josh, I know you've bitten into a delicious, freaking warm, hot, piping chocolate chip cookie, and you've bit into it thinking, man, this is going to be good. And when you bite into it, there's no chocolate chips. First bite sucked, right? And you're like, what the hell? I thought this was a chocolate chip cookie. Then you bite in the other side of it, and there's chocolate chips.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the same theory with fentanyl. They get it into a powder format in Mexico and they drop it into the pill press. Okay. It's not, they're not pharmacists. They're not, this is
so
not,
they're not accurately, career. They're not accurately making sure each dose is what it's supposed
so when
to be.
when it goes into the pill press, it goes in, it clumps, right? There, because they're not perfect. And one pill may have 10% fentanyl. The next pill may have 5%, and the next pill may have 60%. So like depending on where it jumps or where it clumps is different. And so when the DEA has been testing these pills, the ones they are seizing that are illicit are on an average containing 60% fentanyl. Do you know what it takes 2 milligrams of fentanyl to kill you?
Yeah, I knew it was a really small amount.
That's like the tip of a pencil, like 1 or 2 grains of sand. It's tiny. And so that's what's happening is you may get a pill that has 2 grams in it, and the next one might have 60 grams of fentanyl in it or whatever. And so that's how they're dying.
So now that we have a foundation, let's get into the leadership and review. So you were an undercover cop dealing with drugs all the time of your career. Are law enforcement and diplomatic efforts to stem the tide of fentanyl flowing from China sufficient for the state of emergency that we're in? Because I think they're like, this is a true crisis. If that many people are dying per day, it doesn't seem to be that there's getting enough attention. What are your opinions on the law enforcement versus possibly the diplomatic efforts or let's just say political efforts?
Oh man, you know what the problem is no, I Josh, this is what pisses me off the most. And let me give it two fronts. First of all, law enforcement, they're so understaffed and they are struggling to keep up. Right? And they have so much going on. And it's really on the local jurisdiction, they're doing all they can. And they're so busy. I don't know if you just saw Portland, Oregon, their morgues are full. They need help because of all the fentanyl deaths. So they're inundated in Oregon right now, in Seattle, because of what's going on. But here's the problem, man. Listen, and between you and I, the way we handled COVID, whether you're for it or against it, they shut this mother freaking place down. Yep. Okay. The US was absolutely shut down they implemented some curfews and everything changed in our lives. Correct? We couldn't fly. People couldn't come in, and man, we were on high alert. But here's the problem, bro. The number one killer of Americans is fentanyl. Why are we not shutting this freaking place down? And it's really simple. Do you know why we were able to go after Osama bin Laden? Do you know why we're able to go after these guys? Because we've deemed them terrorists.
Yep.
Okay. So by law, we can go chase those guys down. We can go kill them because they're terrorists. Now, The people that are killing more American lives than anybody, ISIS combined, any war that we've fought. Okay. We're going to get political right here. In any lives in American we have lost, we're losing more from fentanyl in the last 5 years, last 3 years. But yet we let this shit keep going. Why can't we deem the Jaliscos and the Sinaloas, why can't we deem them as terrorists? They're killing Americans. Why can't we say, okay, we know it's coming from you. You're now on our hit list. We're coming after you. Guess what happens? That shit shuts down.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to fight against America. We're more powerful. We have the tools to shut it down. But yet on a daily basis, we have 70,000 cars coming across the border a day. That's just cars, not counting foot traffic. We're letting people come in the country and trafficking. We're just letting it happen. And then we'll hire 98,000 new IRS agents. It's like, why don't we hire 98,000 border patrol? Why don't we put them to secure the border? Why don't we protect our country? And so for me, being a cop, if I'm a cop today, I'm pissed off because I'm like, listen, we're fighting an uphill battle. We're fighting a losing battle. We're seizing millions of pills a day, but we're missing 70 million.
Right, because a lot of those are coming in the car traffic.
Yeah.
The pedestrian cars.
Yeah. Or they're wrapped around or stewardess carry. I mean, the problem is it's so lucrative that people want to transport it. They want to bring it across.
Right. So then why aren't we deeming them terrorists?
It's political. I mean, when Biden took office, not that I was excited, but there was one thing that I was really excited about that I thought he would, because of his son. He talked openly about his son's addiction. I was hoping that, hey, he's going to do a lot for addiction recovery. It has been the opposite. Absolutely embarrassing on what he's deemed. Hey, they're throwing a ton of money at opioid addiction, but it's not going to the ground. It's not going to the people who need it the most, right? It's lining government pockets. It's lining big business pockets. It's not going to the end user. And then we're creating all this crazy ass here. Let me give you harm reduction. Now, listen, I agree. Do you know much about harm reduction, Josh? Have you heard about this? What's going on in America?
I've heard the term, but do not.
Yeah. Harm reduction is, hey, let me give you clean needles so you can continue to use heroin, but I want you to use a clean needle so you don't die from something else.
Somewhat like the European method, like I think Scandinavian countries do it.
Let me give you alcohol swabs. Let me give you alcohol. Let me give you all these things. Let me give you fentanyl test strips. And I agree, man. Let's keep these guys alive longer. But in no time do we say, hey, let me help you get into rehab. Let me help you find a support team. Let me pay for you to get into a gym. Let me help you fix your mental mindset. Let me help you toughen up. It's always like, let's go bitch mode on it. Let's soften everybody around us and not make anybody work through addiction. The reason I'm sober is because I hit rock bottom, dude, and I had to have some mental toughness. Mental toughness in America is almost gone.
It's almost non-existent.
It's almost non-existent.
And it seems purposeful, doesn't it?
Dude, it's totally purposeful. Yeah, we're weakening our society by giving and giving. And now Biden's talking about creating these safe zones where you, as a user, can go to the safe zone in any community and you can actively use fentanyl, methamphetamines, heroin in these safe zones. And we're going to make sure you don't die. So if you start overdosing, we're going to hit you with Narcan. Instead of saying, no, we don't want you to use. We love you. We care about you. We want you healthy. Let's go find an alternative. But it's always, let me help you continue your usage. Let me just harm reduce. It's, to me, in my mind, it's like, gosh, dude, it's just counterintuitive, and we're spending millions on this.
Yeah. So is it political or is it money?
Both.
Because I was going to say, like,
they're always driven together.
Right. To me, it has to be money, because if you're not labeling these cartels terrorists and not just going out there and either bombing the shit out of them, shooting the shit out of them, or cutting them off at the knees, which, like you said, we are perfectly capable of doing. We've proven that over and over across the world. But for whatever reason, won't go into Mexico and do that. There has to be some sort of back channel money getting to our politicians that's preventing them from doing that. That's the only rational. Yeah. That's the only rational explanation.
It's it. So right now, I don't know if you've been watching or hearing about the El Chapo. His son got arrested a couple of weeks ago, and so many people freaking died. I think it was like 39 people died from it. Dude, it's different. 303 guys people are dying a day from addiction in the US. I'm not saying let's go start a war, but dude, we have to do something different, because when you see the 2022 stats, you're going to be freaking blown out of the water. And it's not getting better. It's not getting better. So just to let you know, right now, fentanyl, there's now an upgraded fentanyl, which is called carfentanil, which is now old, right? But I want to say it's 100 times more potent than fentanyl. And then every day they're producing these new drugs that are these super drugs that are more potent than anything. Now they're adding this xylazine. I don't think I say it right, but it's an animal tranquilizer into the fentanyl. So if you start, Josh, go watch some of my videos and you'll see these reactions to it. These people are turning into zombies. They're walking. I don't know where you live, Josh, but if you go to the community where this is happening, you can just watch people and they're like hunched over and they're like, they look like freaking walking zombies. They can't even stay awake. They're like falling out of their chairs or at bus stops.
I've seen it. I actually, in my head, attributed it to heroin, but it's probably what you're saying.
It's fentanyl and it's mixed with like xylazine, or it's this carfentanil. It's getting worse. And so in the addiction process, I'm telling you right now, people on the streets are scared to stop using. Nobody wants to stop using fentanyl because the withdrawal from fentanyl is the worst thing they've ever experienced. So they're like, I would rather die than get sober.
Well, you think about it, it's not like any other, we were thinking about 40, 50 years ago, drugs were natural derivatives from plants, whether it was LSD, MDMA, weed, mushrooms, stuff of that nature. Now you're putting a synthetic substance, so essentially a foreign object, into our natural immune system or into our natural domain. I can imagine how bad that would be.
I'm telling you, the reason I won't go back to use opioids today is I'm scared to death of that. I never want to detox like that again. That's serious. And that's the trend that everybody is saying. I'm recording them and they're saying, I don't want to quit because the detox is so bad. So now you're in this dichotomy, right? You're stuck where I want to get sober, but I don't want to get sober because if I detox and I don't want to get sick. So I'm going to keep using so I don't get sick.
Yeah. It's such a sad dichotomy. The only way, like you said, is mental strength to go through hard shit. But if we've weaned that out of society as a whole, and our youngest people in society, 18 to 49, I wouldn't call us above 40 young anymore necessarily, but the 18 to 30 bunch for sure, that millennial Gen Z, that everyone gets a trophy, mental toughness was bred out of them a long time ago. So there's no way that they're going to be able to get out of this.
They've never gone through the hard stuff. They're going through it now, but they collapse because they don't know how to get out of it.
So what would you say? So you think that, well, before I ask the next question, you think that law enforcement is doing what they can. They just are completely understaffed, overwhelmed, and feel like they're out there on an island by themselves.
I think local agencies are kicking ass, to be honest with you. If you open up Google, if you open up the news, every day there's a seizure, there's an arrest, there's a search warrant, and that's all, dude, it seems like that's all they're battling is fentanyl, right? Traffic stops and seizures and all this stuff. the federal government, I don't think is doing enough. If you talk, I mean, I personally have talked to Border Patrol agents. They say the federal government is not doing enough. And so local agencies, yeah, I mean, they're keeping our city streets good, but dude, federally, this stuff, we're understaffed and we're outmanned. The cartels are so much, we think about we're on top of it. They're like light years ahead of us. They're transporting that stuff in every single format available. It's hitting the streets. It's out there. They're storing it up. I mean, it's out there. So federally, I think we have to do better, or this is going to be a generational killer.
Would a wall help?
Here's the deal, man. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, would I like to say yes, but I don't know. What I think is we need technology. We have technology to shut this stuff down, to slow stuff down. All a wall is going to do is just prevent the easy trip over.
The foot traffic.
Right. Yeah, the foot traffic, the easy stuff. But I don't know if Josh, I've flown the Arizona border. When you think about the border, you think that we have a border all around the U.S., right?
No, I know we don't.
It's not. It's like maybe 8 miles here and then terrain. They have these little tiny fences that are like 4 foot tall, bob wire. Like, I think a border legit's going to waste money, but I think people and assets on the ground, we need to do better.
Yeah. So especially with all the traffic coming through that's in the cars, pedestrian cars.
Absolutely.
That's a ton. So let's talk. What can we do as non-police, non-government, our normal parents, our normal everyday citizens? What can we do to help with this? I mean, because I'm a father of 4, you're father of 7. I mean, it's terrifying. Any parent listening is thinking about what we've just talked about, being like, what the hell do I do? Make sure to keep my kids away from this stuff.
Yeah, great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So it's education, man. Like, you and I aren't going to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. We don't have the capabilities, nor manpower, time, or money. So we can't do that. But what we can control is who's around us and who we have power over, right? As a father, as a husband, as leaders, we have to educate. I did an incredible case, man. I was talking to a department in Ohio, and they kicked out a little blurb about them finding a fentanyl pill that was stamped with the Tylenol stamp on it. And when they kicked that, I'm like, I got to call somebody. I got to find out if this is true, right? So I called the detective in Ohio. I spoke with him personally. He said, yeah, man, we just did a seizure of fentanyl Tylenol tablets. And I'm like, can you send me some pictures? So he sends me pictures of their front and back, and they said stamped Tylenol with the T on the front, look just like what you're going to buy from the store, right? And so I posted about it and talked about it. Here's the crazy part. Your daughter has cramps. She's at school. She goes to one of her friends. Hey, do you have any Tylenol? Do you have anything like that? Any Bear aspirin? And she pulls it out of her purse and gives it to your daughter. She can't take it. She can't take that because it's not her bottle. Yeah. And so that's what it comes down to. It comes down to educating our kids and giving them an out so they don't ever put themselves in that spot. Because like you said, most of these accidents, these overdoses, these poisonings are happening because the kids are unaware of what it is. They think it's harmless. Dude, they hurt their neck in a football game on the way home. Someone says, hey, man, I can give you this pill. I've taken these before. They make me feel great. They take it and they die. And so that's what we're seeing time over time. If you start looking at these articles and families that are writing about it, that's what's happening, right? The big stuff, the big cartel stuff, like it's important to be aware of, but like we can't control it.
Yeah.
We don't have power over there, but educating your kid and talking to your kids and saying, listen, we're going to have a sit down. I'm going to show you what this stuff looks like. We're going to talk about it. You're going to understand why we don't use it. That's why we don't ever ask for pills. We don't take drugs. If you're depressed, if you're unhappy as a family, we're going to talk about this. We're going to get you the help you need. So you don't have to revert to that stuff.
Yeah, that's so powerful, so good. So let's take it a step further and go to, okay, we have a neck injury, or we have something where we're prescribed an opioid from a doctor. How do we keep our kids from going further with that? Because obviously, like you said, the first time you took it, you felt great. I've had to take opioids before. I actually didn't love it. I didn't love how I felt. So I feel kind of blessed that when I've had surgeries or injuries, that I didn't feel like it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel kind of nauseous, and I didn't want to take them. So I just toughed out the pain, and just took regular ibuprofen.
But that's important, Josh. That designation right there is really important, because not everybody's an addict. Makes sense? Like your grandma goes to the hospital, she breaks her hip, she gets hydrocodone. She's not coming out an addict 9 times out of 10. But there are people like me that just were predisposed to addiction. Like I tasted it, I loved it. I'm like, okay, boom, that's it. That's the holy grail right there. Right. And so you have to know your kids. Like you may have 5 kids and one of them may they may just be like it. Right. They might have an addictive personality to it. Their body's already like recognizes when it hits. So as a dad, you need to make sure that you are paying attention. See, that right there is the answer to everything. We as parents, we don't pay attention, man. We give them these cell phones and we let them venture off. And we sit together in the room and everybody's on their cell phone and they're all looking down, they're all playing. We have no idea who they're talking to on social media, what's going on in their life. We have no idea of their mental health. And we assume, hey, my kid's doing fine because every night at 8:00 she shows up and she's in the room with me. We got to have conversations, man. We got to do those hard conversations, hard talks, be involved in our kids' lives.
Yeah, that is so good. Such good advice. And we've talked about that with other people on here on my podcast before as well, but it bears repeating because we fall into these same traps. We're busy. We're dealing with stuff in our own work life. We have different relationships we're managing, but the most important job we have is if you have kids is as a father and as a spouse. So we got to make sure that we are active. We are asking questions. We're talking about stuff that makes us uncomfortable. Like you brought up cramps. Like as a father, I got 3 daughters. Like we got to be able to have those conversations because if we don't, the implications could be something like this. And then like the guilt that you'd feel the rest of your life is just not worth it. Like let's have a difficult conversation. Uncomfortable. It's not even difficult per se. It's uncomfortable. But let's
Josh,
have it.
I could not tell you the amount of parents that I podcast with, that I meet, that say, not my kid. My kid would never use drugs. And then they're the parents that are burying their kids. And that's the truth. I have a woman that I really love and admire. She lives over here by me, and she was an ER nurse. And her daughter died of fentanyl. And she's like, but we had those conversations, like, and then you start thinking about, it's like, oh man, what more can I do? So this is a leadership podcast. Men, we need to lead. Like that's what it comes down to. We have to be involved in our kids' lives, even when we're tired, even when it's not convenient, even when it's not comfortable, right? We talk about this whole embrace the suck. We all want to be these tough guys, but we avoid those tough conversations because we didn't talk about this stuff when we were little, man. I have a sister that's in prison for 3 life terms for murder. Okay. And looking at it now, I could tell that she went through some difficult mental health challenges. We never talked about it. We never talked about it. Even today, our family will not talk about it because it's like, whoa, well, she had all these mental. I'm like, listen, bullshit. We need to talk about this because every day we're struggling with something. But if you as a parent can't talk to your kid about what's going on and you can't meet them there, then they're not talking to you.
Yeah. Agreed. That's such good advice. Everyone should listen to that twice. I want to make sure that we cover that opioid piece real quick beyond these conversations. Is there anything else that we should do as parents if a doctor prescribes an opioid to our children? Let's say a football injury. We'll just use that as an example. Anything else we should be cognizant of if they're the 1 out of 10 like you that loved it?
Yeah, you're going to see immediate changes, man. You're going to see them sneak it into the pill bottle. You're going to see your pills disappearing. They're going to need more pills than prescribed. Hey, Dad, I went through them. I need more. They're going to start looking for pills, even though they're out at home. They may find them elsewhere, right? So those conversations, if you see an immediate change in attitude, in sleeping behaviors, in anger, and all these things, something's going on with your child. And that's where that leadership comes on. Hey, I see it different. I know my child. This is not them. What's going on? We got to talk about it. And a second thing is you should have Narcan. You should have Narcan in your home. You should have Narcan in your bag. And I don't know if you saw it, but back east, a teacher, 51 years old, went down in front of his 6th grade class 2 weeks ago, teaching 9 o'clock in the morning. He smoked a pill before he went into class, got in front of class, boom, went down. Nurse didn't have Narcan. Police came, they Narcaned him. They found that crap in his room. And so you think about those things, is it might not happen to you, but it might happen to a child that shows up at your house. You might be at a sports field and you see that. And it's easy to have. Like, why we don't have Narcan?
Where can we get it?
Why do you carry a gun? Same thing.
For protection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's to answer your gun question, because that's why I carry a gun. So Narcan, where can we get it?
Well, I see in Arizona, we can go to our pharmacy and we can pick it up. So each country.
We're in Wisconsin, so I'll have to check on that.
Yeah. Check the law. And most places now have updated the laws where you can go to your pharmacy and you can get some.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll check on that as well. Because we don't have a school resource officer where my kids go to school either. So it's made me curious now having this conversation with you does someone at the school have it?
I'm going to put $10 that no.
I'm
going to put $10 that you do not have it at your school, because it's crazy that it's happening all over the nation, but addiction's not popular. It's not a sexy conversation. So my daughter's school didn't have it. And I went and talked to the principal, and I went and talked to the school resource officer. I'm like, hey guys, can I get you some? Do you need it? Right. And so those kind of conversations, it might just be education.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. So that's prompting me, this conversation, if nothing else happens, we're definitely going to make sure that the Narcan is at my kid's school. I don't know if I can affect other kids' school, but I do have a good friend that's a principal. I'll be talking to him as well. But anyone listening to this, make sure you're talking to your kids' schools. Make sure you're talking to the school resource officers, because obviously this is happening more and more. And like Brock said, you don't think it's going to be your kid until it is. Or it's one of your kids' friends and they have to watch their kid, their best friend die. You'd think they're not going to have PTSD and you're not going to deal with that? I promise you they will. So let's have some tough conversations today after listening to this episode, after this conversation that Brock and I are having, and make sure that we can be the change in our local communities as possible. So in wrapping up, I want to be respectful of your time too, Brock. We've had an awesome conversation. Anything else that we didn't cover? I mean, we jumped quite a bit and we got some deep into this fentanyl issue, but anything that you would like to leave with our audience to make sure that we're leaving as lasting an impact as possible?
Yeah. I just want to talk about the mental health component right now. It's still kind of taboo. You know, I think we're as a country, we're getting better at it.
Yeah, the tides are starting to shift a little bit, I feel. Not enough. Like I'm appreciative of you bringing this up.
Yeah, I think for men especially, you know, Josh, I mean, I don't know about you, but who do you reach out to? Like, if you're struggling.
Yeah, I've got some great friends. I have my people. I have my Bible study brothers. So I do have some people around me.
And so that right there is my question, suggestion. If you don't have a team, if you don't have those people in your life, find them, right? Because there are times like when I was sitting there with the gun in my mouth, I wish I'd had someone to call. I wish I would have been able to just pick up a phone and say, hey, dude, I'm really struggling and I need to talk about it. And so that as men, we need to be willing to talk about it before putting the gun in our mouth.
Yes. Literally or figuratively.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But we got to talk about it, man. This is real stuff, and we all struggle.
Yeah. And women, listen to this episode. Make sure that you're a conduit for your man or the men in your life to be someone to listen to, without shame, without guilt, without making them feel any type of way other than supported. Because us men did not grow up like you. We did not grow up with being able to share our emotions, especially, our generation, Brock. And in the generations before us, I think it's gotten a little bit better as the generations have gone about sharing feelings, and then it's okay. But the way we were raised as men was to rub dirt on it, to not cry, and to not feel. That is not a conducive environment for us to be supported, to open up about our feelings, and to feel like we're going to be okay talking to anyone about anything vulnerable. So we need all the support we can get from men and women.
I'll second that, man. Amen on that.
And if you want to get rid of quote unquote toxic masculinity, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, by giving us an ear to talk to. But I got a lot to say on that, but we'll leave that for a different topic for a different day. Man, I really appreciate this conversation, Brock. It was so good. I know we could have talked, you and I both, about mindset and mental strength the whole time, but I just felt compelled when Alicia brought up that you were really passionate about this. I was like, hey, we got to talk about this. And I'm so glad we did. This is going to help a lot of people. So anyone listening to this today, please share this episode as often as possible. This is not a topic that I've ever covered, that I haven't heard anyone else really cover. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. So please share Brock's message. Please share this conversation. Brock, where can they find you, follow you, get a hold of you if they want to have you speak?
Victory Recovery AZ is our Instagram. That's the best place. I really want to push people just to the project. As a parent, I want them to know what's going on. We put a ton of information about fentanyl, signs and symptoms, overdose awareness, Narcan. All that stuff. I just want to educate the people, help them. If they can, we could save a life. Crazy stories. I give out Narcan in our parks, and I gave a Narcan to a transient homeless guy. And he come riding up to me yesterday and knocked on my window and said, "Hey, Bevell, man, that Narcan you gave me saved the dude's life yesterday. He went blue. He went unresponsive. Everybody was screaming and yelling." And he goes, "Wait a minute. I got Narcan in my bag," pulled it out, put it up his nose, and saved the guy's life. And I'm just like, that right there, that awareness, that to make a choice, to help people, just to be in there at that spot. That was huge for him, right? And so that's the whole reason what we're doing. That's why I'm blessed, Josh, that you would even cover this topic. A lot of people are gun shy. They don't want to talk about this. So I appreciate that. So Victory Recovery AZ is the best place. Just Instagram, hit us up.
That's good. Well, I'll give you this, is you saved that guy's life. You weren't physically there, but had you not given that guy that Narcan, that dude's dead.
Bless, man.
Keep
Another
doing
God
the great,
shot.
Yeah, keep doing the great work that you're doing, Brock. It's definitely saving lives, because, again, this is not getting talked about enough, and this is a full-blown crisis in our country. So everybody listening, again, share this episode. Remember, good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.